Thursday, 3rd of February, 1944. Dear Kitty, invasion fever in the country is mounting daily. If you were here, on the one hand, you would probably feel the effect of all these preparations just as I do, and, on the other, you would laugh at us for making such a fuss. Who knows? Perhaps for nothing. All the newspapers are full of the invasion and are driving people mad by saying that, in the event of the English landing in Holland, the Germans will do all they can to defend the country. If necessary, they will resort to flooding. With this, maps have been published, on which the parts of Holland that will be under water are marked. As this applies to large parts of Amsterdam, the first question was, what shall we do if the water in the streets rises to 1 meter? The answer given by different people vary considerably. As walking or cycling is out of the question, we shall have to wade through the stagnant water. Of course not. One will have to try and swim. We shall all put our bathing suits and caps and swim under water as much as possible. Then no one will see that we are Jews. Oh, what nonsense! I'd like to see the ladies swimming if the rats started biting their legs. That was naturally a man. Just see who screams the loudest. We shan't be able to get out of the house anyways. The warehouse will definitely collapse if there is a flood. It is so wobbly already. Listen, folks, all joking apart, we shall try and get a boat. Why bother? I know something much better. We each get hold of a wooden packing case from the attic and row with a soup ladle. I shall walk on stilts. I used to be an expert at it in my youth. Hank Van Santen won't need to. He's sure to take his wife on his back, then she'll be on stilts. This gives you a rough idea, doesn't it, Kit? This chatter is all very amusing, but the truth may be otherwise. A second question about the invasion was bound to arise. What do we do if the Germans evacuate Amsterdam? Leave the city too, and disguise ourselves as best we can. Don't go. Whatever happens, stay put. The only thing to do is remain here. The Germans are quite capable of driving the whole population right into Germany, where they will all die. Yes, naturally, we shall stay here, since this is the safest place. We'll try and fetch Kufus and his family over here to come and live with us. We'll try and get hold of a sack of wood wool, then we can sleep on the floor. Let's ask Meep and Kufus to start bringing blankets here. We'll order some extra corn in addition to our 60 pounds. Let's get Hank to try and obtain more peas and beans. We have about 60 pounds of beans and 10 pounds of peas in the house at present. Don't forget that we've got 50 tins of vegetables. Mummy, just count up how much we've got of other food, will you? 10 tins of fish, 40 tins of milk, 10 kilos of milk powder, 3 bottles of salad oil, 4 preserving jars of butter, 4 ditto of meat, 2 wicker-covered bottles of strawberries, 2 bottles of raspberries, 20 bottles of tomatoes, 10 pounds of rolled oats, 8 pounds of rice, and that's all. Our stock's not too bad, but if you think that we may be having visitors as well and drawing from reserves each week, then it seems more than it actually is. We have sufficient coal and firewood in the house, also candles. Let's all make little money bags, which could easily be hidden in our clothing, in case we want to take money with us. We'll make lists of the most important things to take, should we have to run for it, and pack rucksacks now in readiness. If it gets that far, we'll put 2 people on watch, one in the front and one in the back loft. I say, what's the use of collecting such stocks of food if we haven't any water, gas, or electricity? Then we must cook on the stove, filter and boil our water. We'll clean out some large wicker bottles and store water in them. I hear nothing but this sort of talk the whole day long. Invasion and nothing but invasion. Arguments about suffering from hunger, dying, bombs, fire extinguishers, sleeping bags, Jewish vouchers, poisonous gases, etc., etc. None of it is exactly cheering. The gentlemen in the secret annex given pretty straightforward warnings. An example is the following conversation with Hank. Secret Annex. We are afraid that if the Germans withdraw, they will take the whole population with them. Hank. That is impossible. They haven't the trains at their disposal. Secret Annex. Trains? Do you really think they'd put civilians in carriages? Out of the question. They could use Shank's mare. Per pedis asporum, Dussel always says. Hank. I don't believe a word of it. You look on the black side of everything. What would be their object in driving all the citizens along with them? Secret Annex. Didn't you know that Goebbels said, if we have to withdraw, we shall slam the doors of all the occupied countries behind us? Hank. They have said so much already. Secret Annex. Do you think the Germans are above doing such a thing or too humane? What they think is this. If we have to go down, then everybody in our clutches will go down with us. Hank. Tell that to the Marines. I just don't believe it. Secret Annex. It always the same song. No one will see danger approaching until it is actually on top of them. Hank. But you know nothing definite. You just simply suppose. Secret Annex. We have all been through it ourselves, first in Germany and then here. And what is going on in Russia? Hank. You mustn't include the Jews. I don't think anyone knows what is going on in Russia. The English and the Russians are sure to exaggerate things for propaganda purpose, just like the Germans. Secret Annex. Out of the question. The English have always told the truth over the wireless, and suppose they do exaggerate the news. The facts are bad enough anyway, because you can't deny that many millions of peace-loving people were just simply murdered or gassed in Poland and Russia. I will spare you further examples of these conversations. I myself keep very quiet and don't take any notice of all the fuss and excitement. I have now reached the stage that I don't care whether I live or die. The world will still keep on turning without me. What is going to happen will happen, and anyway, it's no good trying to resist. I trust to luck and do nothing but work, hoping that all will end well. Yours, Anne. Saturday, 12th of February, 1944. Dear Kitty, the sun is shining, the sky is a deep blue, there is a lovely breeze, and I am longing, so longing, for everything. To talk, for freedom, for friends, to be alone. And I do so long to cry. I feel as if I'm going to burst, and I know that it would get better with crying, but I can't. I'm restless. I go from one room to the other, breathe through the crack of a closed window, feel my heart beating as if it is saying, "Can't you satisfy my longings at last?" I believe that it's spring within me. I feel that spring is awakening. I feel it in my whole body and soul. It is an effort to behave normally. I feel utterly confused, don't know what to read, what to write, what to do. I only know that I am longing. Yours, Anne. Sunday, 13th of February, 1944. Dear Kitty, since Saturday, a lot has changed for me. It came about like this. I longed, and am still longing, but now something has happened, which has made it a little, just a little, less. To my great joy, I will be quite honest about it. Already this morning I noticed that Peter kept looking at me all the time. Not in the ordinary way. I don't know how. I just can't explain it. I used to think that Peter was in love with Margot, but yesterday I suddenly had the feeling that it is not so. I made a special effort not to look at him too much, because whenever I did, he kept on looking too, and then, then it gave me a lovely feeling inside, but which I mustn't feel too often. I desperately want to be alone. Daddy has noticed that I'm not quite my usual self, but I really can't tell him everything. Leave me in peace, leave me alone. That's what I'd like to keep crying out all the time. Who knows, the day may come when I'm left alone more than I would wish. Yours, Anne. Monday, 14th of February, 1944. Dear Kitty, on Sunday evening, everyone except Pim and me was sitting beside the wireless in order to listen to the immortal music of the German masters. Dussel fiddled with the knobs continually. This annoyed Peter, and the others too. After restraining himself for half an hour, Peter asked somewhat irritably if the twisting and turning might stop. Dussel answered in his most hoity-toity manner, "I'm getting it all right." Peter became angry, was rude, Mr. Van Daan took his side, and Dussel had to give in. That was all. The reason in itself was very unimportant, but Peter seems to have taken it very much to heart. In any case, when I was rummaging about in the bookcase in the attic, he came up to me and began telling me the whole story. I didn't know anything about it, but Peter soon saw that he had found an attentive ear and got fairly into his stride. "Yes, and you see," he said, "I don't easily say anything, because I know beforehand that I'll only become tongue-tied. I begin to stutter, blush, and twist around what I want to say, until I have to break off because I simply can't find the words. That's what happened yesterday. I wanted to say something quite different, but once I had started, I got in a hopeless muddle, and that's frightful. I used to have a bad habit. I wish I still had it now. If I was angry with anyone, rather than argue it out, I would get to work on him with my fists. I quite realize that this method doesn't get me anywhere, and that is why I admire you. You are never at a loss for a word. You say exactly what you want to say to people and are never the least bit shy. I can tell you, you're making a big mistake, I answered. I usually say things quite differently from the way I meant to say them, and then I talk too much and far too long, and that's just as bad. I couldn't help laughing to myself over this sentence. However, I wanted to let him go on talking about himself, so I kept my amusement to myself, went and sat on a cushion on the floor, put my arms around my bent knees, and looked at him attentively. I am very glad that there is someone else in the house who can get into the same fits of rage as I get into. I could see it did Peter good to pull Dussel to pieces to his heart's content, without fearing of my telling tales. And as for me, I was very pleased because I sensed a real feeling of fellowship, such as I can only remember having had with my girl friends. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, 16th of February, 1944. Dear Kitty, it's Margot's birthday. Peter came at 12:30 to look at the presents and stayed much longer than was strictly necessary, a thing he had never done otherwise. In the afternoon I went to get some coffee, and after that potatoes, because I wanted to spoil Margot just for that one day in the year. I went through Peter's room. He took all his papers off the stairs at once, and I asked whether I should close the trap-door to the attic. Yes, he replied. Knock when you come back, then I'll open it for you. I thanked him, went upstairs, and searched at least 10 minutes in the large barrel for the smallest potatoes. Then my back began to ache and I got cold. Naturally, I didn't knock, but opened the trap-door myself. But still, he came to me most obligingly and took the pan from me. I've looked for a long time. These are the smallest I could find, I said. Did you look in the big barrel? Yes, I've been over them all. By this time I was standing at the bottom of the stairs, and he looked searchingly in the pan which he was still holding. Oh, but these are first-rate, he said, and added when I took the pan from him, I congratulate you. At the same time he gave me such a gentle, warm look which made a tender glow within me. I could really see that he wanted to please me, and because he couldn't make a long complimentary speech, he spoke with his eyes. I understood him, oh, so well, and was very grateful. It gives me pleasure even now when I recall those words and that look he gave me. When I went downstairs, Mummy said that I must get some more potatoes, this time for supper. I willingly offered to go upstairs again. When I came into Peter's room, I apologized at having to disturb him again. When I was already on the stairs, he got up and went and stood between the door and the wall, firmly took hold of my arm, and wanted to hold me back by force. I'll go, he said. I replied that it really wasn't necessary, and that I didn't have to get particularly small ones this time. Then he was convinced and let my arm go. On the way down, he came and opened the trap-door and took the pan again. When I reached the door, I asked, "What are you doing?" "French," he replied. I asked if I might glance through the exercises, washed my hands, and went and sat on the divan opposite him. We soon began talking, after I explained some of the French to him. He told me that he wanted to go to the Dutch East Indies and live on a plantation later on. He talked about his home life, about the black market, and then he said that he felt so useless. I told him that he certainly had a very strong inferiority complex. He talked about the Jews. He would have found it much easier if he'd been a Christian, and if he could be one after the war. I asked if he wanted to be baptized, but that wasn't the case either. Who was to know whether he was a Jew when the war was over, he said. This gave me rather a pang. It seems such a pity that there's always just a tinge of dishonesty about him. For the rest, we chattered very pleasantly about Daddy and about judging people's characters and all kinds of things. I can't remember exactly what now. It was 4:30 by the time I left. In the evening he said something that I thought was nice. We were talking about a picture of a film star that I had given him once, which has now been hanging in his room for at least a year and a half. He liked it very much, and I offered to give him a few more sometime. No, he replied, I'd rather leave it like this. I look at it every day, and they have grown to be my friends. Continue, page 155 and 156.